One, two, 1, 2. Only for you. You're welcome. Bye.
Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chairman and the ranking minority member. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Again, good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Member Day hearing. These hearings present an opportunity for members who don't sit on our committee, as well as some who do, to testify on behalf of legislation and to raise awareness of issues within the jurisdiction of the Committee on Natural Resources. Natural resources issues have a profound impact on every American, whether they happen to live in the stretches of rural Arkansas contained in my district, on a ranch under the big sky of Montana, or amidst the mountains and forests of the Northeast. Suburbanites and city residents are also significantly affected by the contours of natural resource policy. Today, we will be privileged to hear from our colleagues on issues that are important to their communities and to learn about their proposed solutions. But today isn't the starting point for much of this work. Rather, it's a continuation of the process of expansive, district-centric engagement that our committee has been carrying out. Just last week, we advanced a historic budget reconciliation title that generates more than $18.5 billion in new revenues and savings for the American people by unleashing our nation's abundant natural resources. The legislation was months in the making and represents committee Republicans' commitment to make common sense, science-based, and economically sound decisions concerning our public resources. By reinstating onshore oil and gas lease sales, increasing timber harvesting on federal lands, and rescinding misguided slush funds, the committee Republicans are delivering on our commitment to get our nation's fiscal house in order and make our nation energy dominant today and far into the future. House Republicans have also championed legislation in this Congress on issues like permitting reform. America's permitting process is broken, and it's far past time to push back against the special interest groups who have weaponized the process to block projects. We have the opportunity to solve some of the most pressing issues facing our communities by streamlining permitting for crucial infrastructure projects and eliminating bureaucratic red tape that holds back the responsible development of our domestic energy and mineral resources, along with infrastructure and many other projects that get bogged down in the red tape of permitting. Without tackling this reform, we cannot usher in a golden age of American energy. We cannot reduce wildfire risk or complete almost any large-scale projects across our great nation. One of the important solutions to reducing regulatory hurdles in the United States is the ESA Amendments Act of 2025, which makes critical updates to the Endangered Species Act. It has been noted on this committee that since its inception, the ESA only succeeded in recovering about 3% of listed species. If a football team only made first downs on 3% of its possessions, it would be foolish to blindly continue running the same play while expecting a different result. The same is true with ESA. The federal government continues to run the same failing play, expecting to finally win the game of sensibly protecting our endangered species. The ESA Amendments Act of 2025 incentivizes the recovery of listed species, promotes species conservation on public and private lands, codifies clear definitions, and streamlines the ESA permitting process. This new playbook will help us run plays that actually achieve the Act's original goal, and that is to ensure that species are recovered and then remove them from the list. These are just a few of the priorities we've been advancing this Congress, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues today on legislative initiatives important to them and their constituents. Thank you again for taking the time to join us. I yield back and recognize the ranking member for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. Our committee has one of the broadest and most consequential mandates in this Congress. At our best, we develop and enact legislation and do oversight that safeguards the conservation and sustainable use of America's natural and historic resources, from energy and minerals to rangeland, fisheries, and forests. We strengthen the health and resilience of federal lands and waters, along with the communities that depend on them. We protect and restore our country's most irreplaceable and unique places and wildlife, and we improve the lives of Indian tribes, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, and American citizens living in the U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico. But we are not at our best right now. And Mr. Chairman, I have a different view of what happened in this committee last week. Jamming through the most extreme, environmentally destructive bill in our country's history as part of a broader package to give tax cuts and sweetheart deals to some of the largest and wealthiest corporations and richest billionaires in the world, and doing that while refusing to adopt or even debate more than 120 Democrat amendments. That was a spectacle. That was not a deliberative process. And I'm told that your colleagues in other committees this week have changed course and are participating in debates, which, I think perhaps highlights and underscores just how untenable and disappointing it was the way Republicans comported themselves in that markup here in our committee. I've never seen anything like it, and I hope we never see anything like it again. Committee Democrats will continue to fight that legislation and press Republicans to help us hold this president and his billionaire pals accountable. I hope that now the committee can also find some time to identify things across the aisle that perhaps we can work together on. Today's hearing would be a good place to try to do that. Hearing testimony from members across the House about issues that matter to them and their constituents will perhaps be a refreshing reminder about why this institution exists, why we're all here to represent the people, not just the oligarchs. Some priorities from my perspective include restoring and managing our forests to balance timber production with the production of wildlife, protection of wildlife, clean air, clean water, and reduce the likelihood of catastrophic fires. I hope we can all agree on that. Developing rational water policy that makes the most of the supplies that we have, develops innovative approaches to enhancing supply, and supports both agriculture and municipalities while protecting the environment and recognizing the reality of the climate crisis. Rebuilding and maintaining healthy fish stocks and freshwater and ocean ecosystems that support them. We need to do this to benefit fishing communities and the public at large. And then working hand in hand with Indian country to honor our trust responsibilities and improve management of ancestral homelands, including through legislation like the Tribal Co-Management Bill that I'm introducing, along with several of my Democratic colleagues, but which unfortunately was left off the agenda for next week's hearing on the subject. This also includes my Norelmuck recognition bill. I hope to have a hearing on that in this Congress. It simply grants federal recognition to the Norelmuck tribe, allowing them to be eligible for the services and benefits from the federal government that they deserve. And additionally, my colleague, Representative Leger Fernandez and Representative Stansberry, they have a tribal water rights settlement bill which would resolve decades of conflict and enhance water supply reliability for numerous Western communities. All these are priorities that share a common thread: how we meet the challenge of climate change. Our committee has a critical role to play in the clean energy transition, not just so the United States can play our part in reducing carbon pollution, but so that we can reap the benefits of clean energy manufacturing and jobs. The people we represent are having to adapt their behaviors and expectations in a rapidly warming world, and this committee has a responsibility to acknowledge that and to help. Some of my priorities may resonate with you, some may not. That's the nature of a diverse committee representing diverse constituencies from across the country. That can be a strength, not a weakness. I hope each of us comes to today's hearing prepared to listen, and by doing that and focusing on solving problems, we can help Congress regain some of the respect that it's lost from Americans, make our country stronger, safer, fairer, and more prosperous now and for generations to come. So thanks to the members who are testifying today. I look forward to hearing your insights, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. We will now move to hear testimony from members. Each member will have 5 minutes to provide their testimony. Their entire written testimony will be entered into the record. Members are allowed to ask questions to other members and can engage in dialogue. We do ask that members keep the dialogue and questions brief and within the 5-minute time frame. We've grouped members into panels to accommodate their availability. I will now recognize my colleague, the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Mann. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman Westerman, Ranking Member Huffman, and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. I represent the Big First District of Kansas, which is 60 primarily rural counties in central and western Kansas. The Big First backbone is agriculture, so more than 60,000 farms, feed yards, and ranches. Our producers are working tirelessly every day to keep us all fed while dealing with the burdens of inflation, drought, and market fluctuations. The last thing they need is the federal government handcuffing them with senseless red tape and threatening their livelihoods. The designation of the lesser prairie chicken as threatened in places like Kansas is yet another example of these unacceptable DC bureaucratic regulations. Kansas producers have voluntarily conserved more than 40,000 acres of habitat for the lesser prairie chicken through both private investment and conservation programs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Again, voluntarily 40,000 acres. One Kansas rancher told me that he spotted a lesser prairie chicken in one of his pastures where his cattle were grazing. He had to move all of the cattle from not only that pasture, but also the other pastures adjacent to it by that afternoon, just because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife recorded that bird. Imagine having to upend your livelihood for something like that in your own life. The population of the lesser prairie chicken rises and falls with rainfall, not the normal activity of farmers and ranchers. Historic droughts in the Great Plains have affected the lesser prairie chicken population and the wheat harvest, which has been devastatingly small in the last few years. Big government does not need to step in and force farmers and ranchers to upend their operations for the sake of this bird, whose population is predicted to bounce back on its own with additional rainfall, as it did in 2016 after a drought just 3 years before. I fully support any efforts of the committee to stand up for producers' rights to private property and self-determination, and look forward to seeing this burdensome regulation overturned. I would also like to take some time this morning to discuss Haskell Indian Nations University, located in my district in Lawrence, Kansas. Established in 1884 by federal legislation aimed to fulfill the United States treaty and trust obligations to provide a high-quality education for American Indians, Haskell is the only tribal university in the world with an entirely indigenous population. It is a one-of-a-kind historic and invaluable institution. However, let me be clear. When it comes to Haskell, the U.S. Department of Interior and the Bureau of Indian Education has dropped the ball. Years of mismanagement, lack of oversight, and cycles of misconduct have all compounded, and Congress needs to conduct serious oversight. The students and faculty at Haskell deserve a safe learning and working environment. I was encouraged and appreciated this committee's oversight efforts in the 118th Congress and hope to see that continue in this Congress. I, along with Senator Jerry Moran from Kansas, are planning to introduce the Haskell Indians Nation University Improvement Act, which would federally charter Haskell and separate it from the governance of the BIE. The federal government has sadly done a disservice to this school, and one way to make this right is to put the education of Haskell students back in the hands of Indian country. While the federal government will still be obligated to provide necessary funds to the school, governance would be transferred to qualified tribal leaders from across the country. This legislation would open the door for opportunities that Haskell is currently not eligible for, and the ability to expand educational programs and provide Native students with a safe and better learning environment. I encourage all my colleagues to support this legislation when it's introduced. As the committee continues its work on legislation and oversight surrounding the Endangered Species Act and Haskell Indian Nations University, I ask that you ensure my comments today are taken into consideration, and I appreciate your time and listening for what I have to say and for allowing me to testify. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on these timely important issues, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Representative Mann, and you bring forth some issues that are very important to the committee, and especially the Haskell issue. I believe there's broad bipartisan support to delve into that more and try to rectify that situation. You told a common story with the prairie chicken in Kansas, but it's other species that have been weaponized in other places across the country, and that's why I think it's important that we get an ESA that works for animals, one that not only keeps them from going extinct, but helps them to recover, as the enabling legislation said. So appreciate you bringing those issues forward. Does any other member have a question for Representative Mann? And thank you for your testimony. I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Dr. Gosar. You have 5 minutes.
I thank Chairman Westerman and the committee for hosting this Members' Day hearing. This committee has heard me talk about the importance of my bill, H.R. 34, the Land and Social Security Optimization Act, also known as the LASSO Act. This legislation deposits 10% of revenue generated by certain public lands, like the land under the Outer Continental Shelf, into the federal Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund. This trust fund pays Social Security benefits to retired workers, their spouses, their children, and survivors of deceased insured workers. It is expected to be depleted by 2033, threatening the hard-earned Social Security benefits of retired Americans. My two-page common sense bill strengthens Social Security by reinforcing the OASI trust fund with public lands revenue. The more we use the public lands, the more money is deposited in Social Security. What a concept. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the LASSO Act would increase the amount credited to the trust fund by roughly $15 billion, well, from the time of 2025 to 2035, or 10 years. By depositing revenue to Social Security, the LASSO Act creates a tangible benefit for the American people through the enhanced utilization of public lands. From the everyday American's perspective, this bill encourages revenue-generated activities like offshore and onshore energy development, livestock grazing, and timber harvesting. From a Beltway politician's perspective, it disincentivizes abuse of the Antiquities Act or actions such as the previous administration's Biden withdrawal of more than 625 million acres of federal waters from future oil and gas leasing. Bottom line, this bill ensures the future of Social Security while promoting the multiple use doctrine of our public lands. It puts the future of Social Security into the hands of Americans. What a concept. It's where it belongs. This bill has received the endorsement of 60 Plus Association, American Stewards of Liberty, Americans for Limited Government, Arizona Rock Products Association, Association of Mature American Citizens, and Domestic Energy Producers Alliance. I also thank the 13 members who have already co-sponsored, including Representative Boebert and Fulcher, who sit on this committee. I extend my personal invitation to every member of this committee to sign on to my important legislation, including any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Here's your opportunity to stop lamenting about the future of Social Security and work with me to secure that program. Once again, I thank Chairman Westerman and the committee for our opportunity for testifying. I look forward to the LASSO Act receiving a markup as soon as we can to reinforce Social Security while also promoting the multiple use of the Americans' public lands. I welcome questions from any members on the committee that may have. And with that, I will yield back to the Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Gosar. Does any member have questions for Dr. Gosar on the LASSO Act?
If there's no questions, I'd like to submit for the record a number of entities that are supporting this legislation for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Gosar. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Nels, for 5 minutes.
Chairman Westerman, Ranking Member Huffman, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for having me here. I come before you during Police Week. Thank you, Pete, for your service in law enforcement as well. To speak in support of my bill, H.R. 309, the National Law Enforcement Officers Remembrance, Support, and Community Outreach Act, which has been referred to this committee. To the 13 members of the committee who have co-sponsored this legislation, I want to thank you for that. Congress created both the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund and the National Law Enforcement Museum to honor and support the law enforcement community and educate the public about the vital importance of law enforcement in the democratic society. The National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund is the only national law enforcement organization created by Congress, and both the memorial and the museum were built with private dollars. Unlike other museums created by Congress, the Law Enforcement Museum receives 0 federal dollars for its programming. The life-saving and educational programs of the National Law Enforcement Museum are just as critical to the nation as other museums that receive federal support from the Department of Interior. My bill would provide that support by establishing a formal program within the Department of Interior to support and enhance the community outreach, public education, and officer safety and wellness programs of the National Law Enforcement Museum through grants to the Officers Memorial Fund. These programs will memorialize and honor law enforcement, compile data on law enforcement fatalities and injuries, increase public understanding of and support for law enforcement, enhance and improve law enforcement officer safety and wellness, and bring law enforcement closer to the communities they serve. I look forward to working with this committee on a path forward on this important legislation, and I yield back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Nels, and thank you for your dedication to law enforcement, and especially this week as we recognize law enforcement officers from across the country and all different agencies. We really appreciate your efforts on that. Any other questions for
Mr. Chair?
Representative Nels?
I would like to echo what you just said, Congressman Nels. Thank you for your support for law enforcement and your professional law enforcement. We really appreciate it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there any further discussion? I now recognize the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Downing. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Westerman, Ranking Member Huffman, and members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to advocate for my district and the people of Montana. And I'm here to discuss two critical pieces of legislation, H.R. 725, the Crow Revenue Act, and H.R. 931. Both are essential for keeping coal mining alive in Montana. The Bull Mountains mine in Musselshell County is the state's only underground coal mine. It provides high-paying jobs for hundreds of Montanans, but Washington's regulatory environment, combined with malicious litigation and judicial activism, has pushed Signal Peak to the brink. Challenges with permitting, limited access to federal coal, regulatory uncertainty threaten the mine's future. Now, if this mine closes, the impact will be devastating for families in towns like Roundup, and the ripple effects will spread throughout Musselshell and Yellowstone County. And when I visited this mine, I spoke with the workers who expressed deep concern about the mine's future. Permitting delays and federal restrictions have made it harder to maintain operations. And this is not just about energy policy. It's about protecting paychecks and ensuring that Montana families can keep working in good-paying jobs. If Signal Peak shuts down, it'll have serious consequences for both rural and urban communities across the region. That's why I introduced H.R. 931 and H.R. 725. These two pieces of legislation are designed to address these challenges directly and ensure the future of coal mining in Montana. H.R. 931, it's scheduled for a hearing later this month, offers a short-term solution to keep Signal Peak operating by reopening specific federal tracts of land for mining that the Biden administration undid. And this bill provides the mine with enough coal to continue operations for another year. This will prevent layoffs and provide workers with stability while we work toward a more permanent solution. H.R. 725, the Crow Revenue Act, is the long-term fix that will allow that mine to continue for years to come. This bill facilitates a critical land exchange that unlocks access to additional federally owned coal reserves, ensuring Signal Peak's future. Without H.R. 725, the mine will run out of mineable coal, but with this bill, we can keep the mine running and support good-paying jobs in Montana. More importantly, H.R. 725 also addresses the Crow tribe's need for revenue stream. Prior to the closure of the Absaloka mine, the tribe had a revenue-sharing agreement with the operation. But with its shutdown, the tribe no longer receives coal revenue. This bill ensures the tribe will regain access to these vital funds by securing a share of the proceeds from the coal mined at Signal Peak. Restoring this revenue will help fund essential services, education, and infrastructure for the tribe. It creates new opportunities for economic development and self-sufficiency. This bill is a critical step in rebuilding the tribe's economic foundation, which has been undermined by the loss of coal revenue since the closure. H.R. 725 provides the Crow tribe with the resources it needs to grow and thrive, and it ensures that the mine continues to provide jobs for Montana workers. Together, H.R. 931 and H.R. 725 offer a comprehensive solution to the challenges facing the Signal Peak mine, its workers, and the Crow tribe. H.R. 931 ensures immediate relief for the mine, while H.R. 725 provides long-term stability and access to critical coal reserves. This is a Montana solution with Montana support. The Crow tribe, the state of Montana, the leaders from both chambers of Congress all back these efforts, recognizing the importance of these bills to our economy and our communities. In closing, I urge my colleagues to support both H.R. 931 and H.R. 725. These bills are not just about coal. They're about jobs, economic stability, and securing a brighter future for the people of Montana. They're about keeping Montana families employed and ensuring the Crow tribe has the resources it needs to prosper. By passing these bills, we can preserve our workforce, promote energy independence, and ensure that our rural communities continue to thrive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Huffman, and members of the committee for your time and consideration. I look forward to working with you to get these bills across the finish line, and I yield.
I thank the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Downing, and we are waiting for another speaker, so I'm going to suspend for just a few minutes till Mr. Moylan gets in. Okay, while we're waiting for Mr. Moylan, we're going to reconvene now because Mr. Scott, the gentleman from Georgia, has arrived. Mr. Scott, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be quick. As most people, I'm in markups right now, so I appreciate your indulgence in letting me slip in the nick of time. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee, thanking you for allowing me the time to discuss my bill, H.R. 2345, which would redesignate Okmulgee Mounds National Historic Park in Macon, Georgia, as the Okmulgee Mounds National Park and Preserve. This will be the first national park in Georgia. It's a bipartisan initiative going back to 1934. Congressman Bishop and I, along with Senators Saxby Chambliss and Johnny Isaacson, first authored the Okmulgee Mounds National Historic Boundary Revision Act in 2014. It was later passed in 2019 and formally enacted in the John D. Dingell Jr. Conservation Management and Recreation Act, which expanded park boundaries, authorized a special resource study that was completed in 2023, and changed its name to the Okmulgee Mounds National Historical Park. As an avid sportsman, I want you to know I've worked with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources to protect and expand hunting and fishing access within the preserve boundary. The language prioritizes public hunting and fishing access while protecting states' rights and regulations and private property rights of Middle Georgians. And I would not have supported the legislation had it not done those things. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I would also like to highlight the positive national security implications of the proposed boundary expansion to include land near or adjacent to Robins Air Force Base, which would preserve installation operational areas and land use compatibility for military maneuvers. Georgia is composed of roughly 38 million acres. About 5.25% of it is in the Federal Registry, much of which constitutes land in Georgia's critical military installations, of which we have 9. This establishment of a national preserve will only increase the federal land inventory of Georgia by about 0.018%. And again, the majority of our land, at least significant portions of it, are in our military installations. Assuming all land within the proposed boundaries acreage is able to be acquired from willing sellers, land will only be acquired through purchase from willing sellers, donations, or land exchange. There will be no eminent domain authorized in this legislation. Last Congress, I worked closely with Chairman Tiffany and his staff to address committee concerns regarding federal land and management of the park and preserve. The 119th version of this bill incorporates that committee feedback with a significantly smaller proposed boundary for the preserve and removal of tribal co-management language. This redesignation and relatively small addition to the Federal Register has the potential to have a significant economic impact for the Middle Georgia region. I understand and acknowledge the very real challenges in states with high acreage of federal land. But in the state of Georgia, this is not a concern. Middle Georgians' concerns lie in the potential commercial development of pristine hunting and fishing lands, the threats to national security and regional economic viability associated with not protecting the encroachment zone of Robins Air Force Base, and the loss of the irreplaceable Muskogee Creek cultural resources and sacred sites. The Okmulgee Mounds National Park and Preserve Establishment Act would create a historic opportunity to protect important natural and cultural resources, protect hunting and fishing for generations to come, and bring economic opportunities to Middle Georgia through the creation of Georgia's first national park. I appreciate the committee's consideration of this bill, and I look forward to our continued work together. Thank you, Representative Scott, and thank you for your advocacy on behalf of your constituents. I know this is an issue that you've discussed with me and that we're trying to work with you on the committee to go through the appropriate process on the lands that you're trying to get designated. Does any other member have a question for Representative Scott? Rep. Elfrith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Scott. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm genuinely curious how many other states do not have a national park, and maybe it's a better question for staff, and I'm happy to take that offline. But
Ma'am, I honestly do not know. I know in the state of Georgia, this would be the first and therefore the only one that we currently have. And as you know, there are a lot of citizens who every year pick a national park to go to, and that's the nature of the increase in tourism that we're.
I look forward to working with you on this.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Representative Scott?
Mr. Chair,
Rep. Stauber, you're recognized.
Representative Scott, thanks for bringing this up. This is a good piece of legislation, and you're doing great work on it, and I look forward to working with you on it, and I yield back.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Thank you, Representative Scott. Will now recognize Representative Moreland for 5
Thank you,
minutes.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, and thank you for hosting this year's Member Day. And as the committee considers legislative priorities for this Congress, I would like to encourage you to examine Guam's unique relationship with the federal government and ways to increase communication and consultation between our governments. Any change in political status must first come from the people of Guam via a plebiscite. But there do exist opportunities to enhance communication. This year, I plan to introduce legislation that would enhance dialogue between Guam and the federal government. Given the military buildup and the Pacific pivot, it is critical that Guam is given a seat at the table in such discussions. I also want to emphasize again the need to pass the Guam Excess Land Return Act. One of the first bills I introduced in Congress and will be reintroducing again later this month. This bill empowers private landowners by authorizing the return of excess federal lands in Guam to be transferred to the original landowners or their heirs. Given that nearly 1/3 of our island is currently owned by the federal government, returning our lands is critical to my constituents. And finally, I respectfully urge the committee to look at the Endangered Species Act and to make common sense reforms around management, listing, and delisting. The ESA is designed to promote conservation and protect species at risk of extinction. Fundamentally, this is a good idea, and we should work to conserve our lands, species, and water. However, issues with federal overreach and at times making it nearly impossible for the public to participate have shown us that there exists room for improvement. So I encourage the committee to look towards greater involvement of the state and territory authorities, innovative partnerships, and carve-outs and exceptions for cultural practices. This is especially prominent in the Pacific Islands, where Native American Pacific Islanders lack recognition in laws like the ESA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Rep. Moreland. Thank you for your dedication to representing your constituents and the many issues that are in the South Pacific and particularly Guam. And we look forward to working with you on solving those issues. Is there any other questions of Representative Moreland?
Mr. Chair?
Pete?
Representative Moylan, thanks for bringing this up. You brought up the ESA. That is something that we really need to work on in a bipartisan fashion because only 3% of the species ever get off that list. And we really need to celebrate the ESA working rather than making it a political football. So I appreciate your comments and thanks for being here.
Any other questions? Thank you again, Rep. Moreland. This will conclude our Member Day hearing. We thank all colleagues for being here to discuss the important matters that come before this committee. Members that were unable to make it can have their testimony entered into the record as well. If there is no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.